Introduction of the tool, Basic Concepts. The InfraStress Resilience tool uses and builds on the assessment methodology and tool developed in the European project SmartResilience, which employed a preliminary version of the assessment methodology. During the InfraStress project, the tool and methodology were thoroughly tested and implemented with a focus on their adaptation to the needs of the project and its end users, SIPs, sensitive industrial plants and sites. The key concept of this methodology involves the resilience of an infrastructure, which describes its ability to cope with potential adverse scenarios or events that can lead to significant disruptions in its operation or functionality. This video introduces the tool and demonstrates its functionality using an InfraStress project pilot. It illustrates the workflow involved with performing a resilience assessment using the tool, including defining the case study, threat scenario, the concept of dynamic checklist or DCL, issues, elements and indicators which are used for the assessment. Structure, from the case study to the assessment. As mentioned, the tool uses an example pilot case study previously created and shared in the assessment tool. The case study is the pilot for an InfraStress called as Luca Koper and Petrol. The assessment process begins with defining the case study, which consists of identifying assets, vulnerabilities, important for the assessment of SIPs. The next step is to define the threat scenario that captures the combination of the particular infrastructure and the threat in question. Dynamic checklists, or DCL in short, are the logical organization and presentation of the core methodology for the InfraStress assessment. They are lists of structured resilience composite indicators, referred in the tool as issues, and indicators. Both are used for resilience level assessment, RL, and functionality level assessment, FL. In its essence, the DCL is the repository of questions, indicators, organized into topics, issues or elements, which needs to be filled in by an assessor to perform an assessment. Case study. The left panel of the user interface contains item manage case studies, DCLs, etc., which allows the user to set up all elements of the structure from the case studies to DCLs. The case study serves as the basis for the various assessments related to the infrastructure, in context. Within each case study, different scenarios are developed, each of which refers to a specific part of the infrastructure or a system that faces a particular threat. User simply clicks on Add New Case Study or Edit and the interface will walk them through the information panels. Users should input the case information detailing the vulnerabilities of infrastructure and the context in question and may add, where applicable, acceptability levels. Special emphasis is on the vulnerabilities, where the user should define their structure, up to 3 levels, and the corresponding interdependencies. This is important, for instance, when visualizing the cascading effects in a specific scenario. Interdependencies are defined, edited under the Edit Interdependencies option, where the user selects the existence of the interdependencies for the previously defined and selected vulnerabilities. Scenario, time series. While the case study constitutes the highest level of assessment, the scenario is the combination of 2 elements, namely, the critical infrastructures involved, and the threats to which these critical infrastructures are exposed to. They are shown through several points on a time series. The scenario form contains description and related information about scenario, including name, the corresponding scenario, affected infrastructures, threats types, long description and the time series. Under time series, users can set up cascading effects, which allows intuitive visualization of interdependencies of the vulnerability objects designed in the case study. In the vulnerability matrix, the vulnerabilities are analyzed at each point of the time series, for dependencies amongst themselves in order to assess the likelihood, impact and direction of cascading effects within the infrastructure. The dependencies defined are showed in the heat map. Dynamic checklist, DCL. Dynamic checklists are the logical organization and presentation of the core assessment methodology in the InfraStress project. These are lists of structured resilience composite indicators, referred as issues, and indicators for resilience level assessment, RL, and functionality elements with functionality indicators for functionality level assessment, FL. Based on the assessment methodology, the resilience level DCL or RLDCL, which is the dynamic checklist dedicated to resilience assessment, has the resilience cycle phases built into the list by default, to which the user can add relevant issues and their suitable indicators. FL, being a special case of the RL, does not require the phases and skips to functionality elements and indicators that the user adds to the FLDCL, which is the dynamic checklist dedicated to functionality assessment of the infrastructure. In its essence, the RLDCL is the repository of questions, used as indicators, organized into topics, referred as issues, which are answered by an assessor in the context of the different phases of the resilience cycle. Once a DCL is created in the tool, it must be associated with a scenario and then the user may assign issues to the different phases. Issues can be searched on the left pane of the screen and can then be dragged and dropped to the relevant phase. Please note that all records can be identified by their index number, which can be used as direct reference. Once the list of issues is complete, the user can proceed with populating the indicator list on the following tab. Similar to the list of issues, the user can search on the left pane and drag and drop the relevant indicators. This procedure is also followed for the creation of the FLDCLs. Elements, issues and indicators. The tool database consists of elements, issues and indicators proposed by the InfraStress partners, as well as the ones resulting from previous collaborative work on other EU and other international projects. Here user can add new items, edit existing ones or approve it. Adding new records can be done either directly in the Resilience tool or through the Resilience Indicator Input template, which can be downloaded from the main page of the member area. This workspace is best used to search for elements, issues or indicators when developing a DCL. Resilience level assessment. Scenarios are assessed, and the case study through them, by assessing the DCLs associated to them. In a bottom-up process, values are assigned to indicators, which are aggregated to obtain their issue score, the scores from issues aggregated to the phase score and all the scores from phases aggregated to compute the DCL score, or resilience index score. This is also the score for the infrastructure within the scenario context. An RL assessment can be started through the resilience level subcategory of the Assess Resilience item on the left pane in the Resilience tool leading to the main resilience assessment page. Other than exploring the existing assessments, a user may of course create new assessments for any of the available DCLs by clicking on the Access button on the Resilience level, DCL level, dark blue line. The assessment level, light blue, contains buttons to the assessment result and modification options, copy, edit, and delete. The last action, MCDM, automates the creation of assessments for the optimization alternatives required for the MCDM process, which could later be connected to the model itself. Creating or editing an assessment. Open the actual assessment form. The header of this form contains the DCL general information as well as the possibility to include coordinates for the assessed infrastructure, used in mapping, and value boundaries, used in reporting. The body of the assessment opens by default in assessor mode, in which assessors can assign an assessed score for indicators, that is from 0 to 5 or yes, no responses following the instructions in the measurements column, calculating said score themselves where needed. This form was created to support in-field assessment and is reflexive so it can be used on smaller resolution screens such as tablets. In the full mode, the assessment designer can define the indicator ranges, the minimum and maximum values and the weights. The assessor only needs to type in the actual values and the system will calculate the indicator score itself. Also in this mode, the assessment designer should indicate to the system as well as, to which dimensions does each issue relates to. Once completed, the user must save the assessment and then proceed towards approving the assessment, top of the form. Functionality level assessment. In its structure and application, The functionality level or FL assessment is fundamentally very similar to the RL assessment and is started from the functionality level subcategory of the Assess Resilience item on the left pane in the Resilience tool. The FL assessment form is very similar in its operation to the RL form described before, including the header. The key difference between the two assessments is the purpose, unlike RL or Resilience, where indicator values are distinct snapshots in a time series. FL or functionality level is assessed over a time period and therefore each indicator has a set of fields for values for each defined time step, inherited directly from the parent scenario, and it does not require ranges or target values. If required, the time steps can be modified by changing the number of steps, 6 by default, by clicking on the Setup/View Time Series under the Time Series group, which allows the user to add descriptions to the different steps. Benchmarking and monitoring. Within a particular scenario, user DCLs can be benchmarked when using the recommended issues proposed by the experts from the particular industry. This is done in order to keep a measure of similarity between general users through the core issues and within the industry through the recommended issues, which will allow benchmarking different organizations. Visualization. The Resilience tool provides a wide palette of visualization options developed to meet the end user's requirements. While the users can try different visualization options, we highlight a couple of them in this video. For interactive infrastructure interdependencies map, using Kepler.gl. The Kepler visualizes cascading effects defined within a scenario. It includes all interdependencies of vulnerabilities at single points within the defined time series. For indicator mapping, using IBM StreamMap. The Resilience tool datasets for resilience assessment have a hierarchical structure, area threat phase issue indicator, facilitating a visual representation through the use of IBM StreamMap display of hierarchical data as a set of nested rectangles. The color of each cell, in this example, corresponds to a level of resilience score, and the size of each cell is proportional to the weight of the indicator on the overall resilience score. There is also a possibility to visualize single or whole set of assessments from the same DCL. For comparing FLs in time and resilience landscape. By comparing FLs in time, users can examine functional levels of different assets, represented by their own assessments, within a given scenario, over time. The FL assessments can be on the exact same timeline, inherited directly from the parent scenario, or custom one, defined within specific assessment. Also, the same comparison of FL can be displayed within a 3D visualization called Resilience Landscape. For both the visualization variants, be it 2D or 3D, the user can select any range from the existing timeline for a better overview of events. Reporting. The Resilience tool also contains Reporting Manager for quick and easy generation of reports, customized to user needs, for any element in the structure, that is separate reports for case study, scenario or assessment. The assessment reports conform to the FEMA standard and contain a section in text, detailing the exercises in which these assessments were carried, other contextual information and the results of the particular assessments. Overview and statistics. From the dashboard of the tool, within the Overview tab, the user can access two most commonly used options, such as editing elements of the structure, from the case study to the assessment, benchmarking, tree map, reports, etc. Here the user can also look at several different statistics, such as in the DCLs, Issues and Indicators tab, the total number of all elements used for one or more case studies,